Hey folks, it's precon review time. I'm going to be critiquing the Eternal Might precon for Aetherdrift and offering some potential points of improvement. The last two precons I've discussed have impressed me with their construction, seeming surprisingly streamlined in their functionality and easily upgradable into a quite decent magic deck. It's actually been a bit disappointing. Like, what am I supposed to say aside from, this is pretty good, cut these 5 bad cards and it'll be even better. Thankfully, that's not a problem with this precon. Though containing good card quality, lots of nice assorted zombie cards, and some nice attention to detail in terms of aesthetics, in terms of construction, this deck is a hot mess express, a disgusting mishmash of conflicting game plans and synergistic dead ends, and I'm excited to tackle it. To start with though, let's talk about what this deck is trying to accomplish. The commander of this deck is Temmet, a 5-mana 4/4 in Esper colors with Vigilance and Menace, as well as the following text. Whenever you attack, draw a card, then discard a card. Whenever you draw a card, zombies you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So, on the surface, this is a card that rewards token zombies or otherwise wide boards of zombies, and also a card that rewards big draw that happens before the combat damage step in a turn. Simple effect, but there are a lot of implied features of this card that we should keep in mind. To be maximally effective, Temmet wants a large board of zombies to attack with, as well as a large draw spell to amp up the buff it grants. And it's also a thing that is likely going to be a removal magnet if we have a large board, since it can threaten a lot of damage. Importantly, this means that the deck will want a lot of mana, both to pay the 5 mana casting cost, and also either draw some cards or hold up mana to protect it. Looking at the rest of the deck, some parts of it reflect these specific needs. There are 8 cards that create small zombie tokens and 3 army generators, cards that create or add counters to a single growing zombie token, and there are also a handful of cards that create 4/4 zombie tokens as well. The deck also contains a healthy 9 ramp spells to help bolster it up to larger quantities of mana. From there, the deck also has a large number of zombie creatures in it, which range from cards that drain opponents to lords to draw spells and beyond. An interesting additional package in the deck is the discard package. The alternate commander for this deck is Hashatan, Scarab's Fist, which can allow a player to make 4/4 zombie copies of discarded creatures, and the deck also contains a handful of other discard payoffs. The amount of discard in the deck isn't wildly large, though, consisting of 5 or 6 cards that allow you to discard, plus a handful of cycling cards. There's also a light graveyard package to go along with this. Rounding out the deck, we have a pretty average number of removal spells. Overall, this deck will be looking to create a wide board of zombies and utilize its cute discard and graveyard sub-themes, and swing in at opponents with a Temmet buffed board. I obviously preempted my overall thoughts on this deck a bit, but I'll start with what I like about what's happening here. As I said earlier, it has a larger than average ramp suite for an Esper deck, which I think is appropriate for this game plan. Crowded Crypt and Bontu's Monument both stand out as fun ramp options with a lot of utility in this deck, offering token production and drain respectively. This deck also contains some number of token producers, and some of these are pretty good. I like the ones that create 1/1 white zombie tokens, and On Wings of Gold's Flying plus Anthem effect is good enough to make the card seem worthwhile, even though this isn't a deck with a super heavy graveyard theme, at least by zombie deck standards. The mana base here is excellent. Really robust symbol counts, even with a couple of great colorless utility lands, and a moderately high but not overwhelming tap land density that also gives players room to gradually update tap lands with better untapped duels. There are also some number of cards that slot in quite elegantly to this deck. Forgotten Creation pairs perfectly with both Temmet and Hashatan, as do the newly printed Prophet of the Scarab and Ret Tomb Mystic. There are also gestures at a number of packages that could exist, a couple Impact Tremors style cards paired with the deck's token package, and a selection of different graveyard and discard enablers and payoffs to give a sampling platter of what that could look like. That's the most generous way to view this deck in my mind. It is a sample of possible game plans and or a toolbox of possible implements for beginning the journey of building them. So what about this as a deck that's trying to play a game of Magic the Gathering? Well, it's a bit disappointing. Hashatan has gotten a lot of attention as an undeniably cool secondary commander, but it doesn't even really work as a secondary commander. The deck just doesn't have enough discard to consistently enable Hashatan's ability. With Hashatan in the 99, you at least have the consistent discard effect of Temmet, but he's also a 5-mana card with an Overrun-esque ability, so trusting him to stick around as an engine is highly optimistic. This lack of discard likewise stands out in the case of other discard payoffs, such as Lazotep Chancellor and Archfiend of Ifnir, though those at least get triggered by the deck's cycling lands. The deck's graveyard package is another thing that stands out. It's not massive, but it is decidedly present, as you'd expect with a zombies deck. This deck is kinda thin on ways to enable it, though. Most zombie decks would be using sacrifice abilities in addition to discard, and while this deck does have the sorts of payoffs when creatures die that those decks tend to have, it's almost entirely lacking in ways to sacrifice creatures. The result is that this deck really lacks a lot of what might give a zombie deck a sense of mechanical identity. Its disjointedness causing both play pattern issues, when disparate synergy packages don't line up, and vibes issues, when it plays just like a generic blob of typal midrange gameplay instead of, like a zombie deck. Okay, so I obviously have issues with this deck's handling of some traditional key zombie subthemes, but let's set that aside. This is a precon. This is meant to be a toolbox and/or a sampling platter. We can give it some slack. Does this deck at least hold up in supporting Temet as a commander? Are we forging an alternative zombie playstyle here? In some ways the answer is yes, but in a lot of other ways the answer is no. As I said earlier, this deck's ramp and mana are well constructed, which is good, as Temet is the sort of card that's going to work better when the deck has mana to play him plus something else in a turn. The token generating suite is okay, and actually contains some pretty high quality stuff, but there are fewer cards that create small zombie tokens than I'd like. Creating 4/4 zombie tokens is cool and all, but Temet's design heavily incentivizes pairing him with lots of small zombies, so the bigger tokens with more rigorous requirements to be created simply feel out of place, even if they're more aesthetically fitting. Even more problematically, this deck doesn't have much of the sort of bursty draw that pairs best with Temet. There isn't a lot of draw overall, and a lot of the draw that is here isn't great for taking advantage of Temet's ability. There isn't a reliable way to sacrifice Corpse Augur, nor any good way to let Midnight Reaper or Undead Augur translate into Temet triggers, and you're not going to tap down your zombies to Cryptbreaker if you want to swing in that turn. Most of the other draw options are mana expensive, so you're looking at 10 mana minimum to do a Temet plus draw maneuver. The one thing working in Temet's favor here is the half dozen or so cycling cards in the deck, but at that point you're paying 5 mana for the commander plus 2 mana to cycle during the combat step for roughly an Undead Warchief worth of Anthem. The final problem is this deck's interaction suite. It has 10 cards that perform a removal role in some way or other, which might work for a faster zombie deck, but I'm not sold on this deck's ability to win quickly. Worse, it has very little protection and no counterspells. A blue deck that's vulnerable to removal and board wipes runs no counterspells. Come on. I don't know. This deck isn't unplayably bad or anything, but it fails to meaningfully commit to any of its sub-themes, and with the way it's currently built, its command zone feels arbitrary at best, just a generic zombie guy that gives the deck its colors. It is a bit more cohesive when we look at the visual presentation, with a clear emphasis on Amoket-style zombies, and there's certainly some admirable effort put into new art for a lot of the cards present. I don't usually treat precon reviews as product reviews or value reviews. I'm much more interested in the deck and the sort of experience that Wizards of the Coast is handing to a newer player who is pulling this out of a box to play a game of Commander with. But I'll make a minor exception here. As a product, there's a lot going for this, and if you are a zombie player who's looking for a bundle of good zombie cards plus some cool new arts, this might absolutely be a great purchase. Just don't buy this if you're looking for a cohesive deck out of the box, because this is not that. With all that said, I still want to try and upgrade for this. When I first saw this precon, my immediate thought was that it'd be cool to morph it into a full Hashaton deck. But honestly, this deck is so far from enabling Hashaton well that I'm inclined to stick with Temet instead and see what we can do with 15 swap outs to try and actually let him feel like a legitimate commander. So let's do that, and I'm going to start by talking about what we're cutting. Binding Mummy and Twisted Abomination aren't great in general, and I'm also going to cut out a couple discard payoffs that aren't adequately supported here. Sorry, Hashaton. Beyond that, Maskwood Nexus seems out of place here. My best guess is it's just here to give more people access to Maskwood Nexus. And I'm going to also cut out a handful of zombies that are just a bit mediocre. This deck is a rare Gravecrawler L. With no sacrifice, this card just doesn't really do anything. Nothing beyond these particularly offends me, but I will trim a handful more mediocre cards just to make space for better support. These are cards that are just on the weaker side mechanically, or which don't tie in particularly well with the game plan I'm trying to cultivate. For our additions, the first order of business is that I want to add a bunch more draw and filtering, since they do double duty in smoothing out the way this deck plays and making it punchier with Temet. Keep Watch, Distant Melody, Pact of the Serpent, and Raffine all allow the deck to give its zombies a massive pump up for a reasonable amount of mana. In addition to these, I'm choosing to add 3 cards for protection that can also draw cards, which are Change of Plans, you find the villain's lair, and your temple is under attack. And these are nice because of their flexibility. The other thing I'm choosing to add is cards that create zombie tokens, 3 total in this case. Siphon Flesh and Dark Salvation both provide removal and token generation, and Endless Ranks of the Dead is a good singular zombie token maker. Honestly, there are a bunch of other zombie token generators in the $5 to $10 range that I didn't add due to price, and if you're really trying to build a good Temet deck, you should probably go find some of those. Varina stands out as a card that is absurdly good in Temet deck, performing both key tasks I'm looking for at a good rate. For a few final additions, Diregraph Captain is just a generically good zombie, and I'm basically having it replace a couple zombie type cards I'm cutting. Lethal Scheme is a removal spell that also includes a good amount of draw-discard filtering, and it's easily payable with black zombie tokens. Felwar Stone and Ponder are here to give some extra ramp and filtering respectively, just smoothing out the overall game plan. The last addition is Cephalid Colosseum, a land that can provide a burst of draw triggers at a great rate at a point in the game when the deck is looking to close things out. Through these changes, my hope is that Temet will be more consistently useful, sticking around longer and providing larger buffs to zombies. The addition of more zombie tokens and removal will hopefully also direct the game plan of the deck in the right direction. Temet definitely isn't my favorite commander. There's definitely less depth there than with the alternate commander Hashaton, but I still can't help but respect the attempt at making a different sort of zombie deck, one more based around drawing and discarding than around death triggers and sacrificing. Hopefully we see more exploration in this direction in the future, and hopefully future zombie precons end up a bit more coherently constructed. Announcement: I have a PO box now, and the address is on screen. Feel free to send me your favorite card or a handwritten poem proclaiming your love of brushwags. The PO box isn't wildly large, so don't send me anything bulky, as there is a solid chance it will be thrown away instead of finding its way to me. This should go without saying, but please also don't send me anything dangerous or disgusting. Thanks! If I get enough cards, I might turn them into a deck, or make them into a video of some sort. Delicious future content for the gaping, content-hungry maws of the world. With that said, thanks for watching, and thanks to Architect for supporting the channel. I'm a fan of Architect's UI, a thing that was on screen basically the whole video, and an especially nice feature for tweaking decks is the maybe board categories, which let me keep thoughts and card additions nice and organized. A link to my upgraded precon list is in the description. I also want to thank my patrons for their support, some of whose names are on screen now. I'll be doing a Q&A next week, so if you want to submit questions for that and or watch it, you can sign up for $3 a month at the link in the description. Alright, bye now.